Today we are entering week 2 of the Omer. Week 2 is the week of Gevorah. It is associated with Yitzchak, with Isaac, and literally we translate Gevorah as strength. But as the Talmud tells us, who is strong? The one who is able to conquer their own desires. So when we think about Gevorah as a Sfirot, as we think of the energy of the week, it's not physical strength, my ability to hold things, my ability to carry anything. It's really my ability to exert self-control, to put up proper boundaries for myself. Like I said, the person who's the paragon of Gevorah is Isaac. And if you think about the key moment of his life was when his father brought him up to sacrifice him on Mount Moriah. And we usually talk about this as something that it has to do with Abraham. That is the final test in Abraham's life, to be going in and bringing at least the culminating test, to bring his son up and have to sacrifice his son. But it's also a test in Yitzchak's life, in Isaac's life. We call it, of course, Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak, that this is the time that he was being brought up to be sacrificed. And we see that he was very aware that he was being sacrificed. There's a very interesting passage that he and his father are walking up together to the mountain. And he says, where is this lamb for the sacrifice? And Abraham basically says, God will provide the lamb. And at that point, it clicks for him that he is actually supposed to be the sacrificial lamb. And the next line is, and again, they walked up together to the mountain. So before, when he thought that he and his father were just going to bring a sacrifice together, they were unified and he was going with his father's desire. And afterwards, once he realized that it was actually his own life that was to be sacrificed, he still was able to say, okay, I can do this. I'm going to go up with you. And we say that Abraham never went through with the sacrifice of Isaac on the mountain. His hand was stopped before he was able to bring the knife down. But Isaac did go through with it because he allowed himself to be bound. Every active thing that he had to do, he held still while his father bound him and held his neck up open to be slaughtered. So whereas Abraham did not complete the actions that he had to do, Isaac had completed the actions of his. He held himself back. He showed tremendous restraint and self-control in giving himself over. Now, I'm not asking you to completely give yourself over to sacrifice this week. But this is a week of self-control, to be thinking about, where are our boundaries? Where do I need to be holding myself back? Where do I need to actually be bringing myself under control? We also see with Yitzchak that he was often chased from place to place, that he'd go to a place, he'd dig a well, he'd redig the same wells that his father had dug, in fact. And other people would come and they'd argue with him. And rather than stand up and fight and say, no, look, I dug this well, this is my water, this is my father's well before me, we had a right to this water, he'd pick up and he'd go. And he'd go somebody else and he'd dig another well. And other people would go and they'd argue with him and say, no, this is our water you're tapping into. And he'd pick up and he'd go until he found a place where he was able to be digging a well and nobody would dispute it. He was very, very cognizant of boundaries. And boundaries are a big aspect of the week of Gevorah. It's a big week to be thinking about, where are the boundaries that I need to be observing and I need to be holding up. And you know what? I might want to be going in there and interfering and bringing everything that I have to bear. But I need to be holding myself back. And this is something that is very relevant for me right now as the father of a teenager, is that there are so many lessons I want to impart. There's so many behaviors I might see that I say, whoa, that's got to stop right now. And it used to be that I had my son's ear to be able to say, okay, this is how we do things, this is how we don't do things. But as everybody who's ever had or been a teenager knows, sometimes the very worst thing you can do if you want to be giving a lesson to a teenager is to be telling them, do this. Sometimes just telling them to do a certain thing actually creates energy against it. You try to get them to do this, and it's more likely to get them to rebel against that. Now, we've really started to realize that, a lot of parenting a teenager is being able to hold back, is being able to create boundaries and say, all right, we are going to be holding back on what we try to give to him, because there's only so much ability for him to receive, and he's in that period where he needs to be really declaring his own independence. So this is a lot about not just boundaries in terms of you can do this, you can't do that. That would be a certain type of boundary that we would impart on him. But I'm talking now about the boundaries of ourselves. Like, okay, there's only so much teaching we can do. If there's something we want to impart, it's got to be pretty darn important for us to be imparting that, because there's only so many messages that are going to get through. So what are all the different ways I want to be expressing myself? And I need to be holding back a lot of that, because the more I do, the less effective I'm going to be. So this is really, it's a big week about thinking about our control and our boundaries. And Gevorah doesn't tend to be an end within itself. You know, the person who is total Gevorah tends to be a loner, tends to not be so much in relationship, tends to be holding back, tends to not care much about others and not have others care much about them. But a certain amount of Gevorah is actually a huge essence for creating successful relationships. So we're not looking to create total Gevorah. Amount of total Gevorah is really overboard. But to look at where are the places where more Gevorah would be healthy in my life. And that's what we're going to be pursuing all this week.